Hi, welcome to this video. This is ABAKETONEBORIKEJ. I hope you like this video. Like, share, and subscribe. In this video, we are going to talk about some of the tallest people in the world. Now, this is not going to be a video essay. So, I'm just going to talk over this video as if this was maybe a live. So let's see how this goes. So I've been wanting to make this video for a long time, but not too long. It was exactly the time when Devin Lorette or Devin Larrett or Larrett or however you really say that name. But ever since he was talking about some indigenous people in Ojibugum, I'm so sorry, Ojibugumo, Ojibugumo, Ojibugumo. So I'm not sure, but I think that's maybe South Quebec en lo que Canada. In English they say Canada, but I think in Spanish is Canada. But correct me if I'm wrong anyhow, so I'm still gonna treat this video like if it was like some sort of a live, but I wasn't ready to do a live today. I was just gonna treat this video in such a way, in such a fashion. But however, he was talking about, Devin Lorette. He was talking about from his sport. Well, he was going to train with some indigenous people, and indigenous people, and this is my channel where I can just say that I celebrate things, aspects from being partially indigenous, which comes with being Boricua. So if this is your first time in this video, so I'm not sure, but if this is your first time, then you should know that I'm a Boricua. So being a modern day Boricua doesn't mean that I am indigenous. However, in the past, it used to mean designation, ethnic designation, total ethnic designation to refer to the indigenous people of the island of Boriquén. So the actual name of Puerto Rico is Boriquén. Like, Puerto Rico is just a given name. Actually, Puerto Rico used to be part of San Juan. That used to be the name. So in reality, the name of Puerto Rico is not Puerto Rico, and in all due respect, we are all Puerto Ricans. But if we go if we dive deep into the meanings and the reality, the utmost reality of what is the name of Puerto Rico, then it really is not Puerto Rico. Although for modern terms, not for modern terms, I'm so sorry, but for like for today's intensive purposes, is that how you say? For all intensive purposes, I think that's how you say that. So for all intensive purposes, which is the modern day, so the name is Puerto Rico for sure. But let's talk about some of the tallest people in the world, and you're gonna see how that correlates to my channel, which, like I said, the thing is that Puerto Ricans share some indigenous ancestry, not all in the same level, but it's pretty similar. Like at this point, I've seen like thousands of DNA tests from Puerto Ricans, and when I say thousands, I don't think like, I'm being honest, like, that's about right. It's something close to that for sure. So if we continue to explore about this topic and about the height, so then I'm gonna mention some ethnicities and or nations of the world that are known to be some of the tallest people in the world. If I don't mention your nation or some nation that you don't know, then my bad. I'm sorry, but if I mention three, then that's okay, because I'm just gonna talk about some of the tallest people in the world, and I just want to mention three because, like I said, Devin Lorette, who is an arm wrestler, so he explores genetic topics because you have to have, for some reason, I don't have that, man, but I wish to have genetics for sports and all that sort of stuff, which I do for some sports, but not exactly for these type of sports, which are strength sports. I am strong, but so this pertains also to Devin. So he is 6'5", but he recently did a DEXA scan, and in that test, they measured his height, and he's not 6'5". He's 6'6". So officially, he's 6'6". He probably did that a long time ago, and he probably did it wrong or something like that, where they measured 6'5", but he's actually literally 6'6". And this happens to be the case with Brian Shaw too. So they're both 6'6", and they both share these genetics to be tall and have this bone density that is over the average. So we have Devin Lorette and Brian Shaw. One, they're super tall, and that's what this video is all about. So Devin is from Canada, but he has ancestry from Germany. And he probably has different. And then Brian Shaw is from the United States, but I had read that his last name is most likely from the UK or something like that, but most likely. So then I'm going to mention. Okay, so first I'm going to mention that Devin Lorette, he was in a tribe. He went to train with a tribe. He was going to meet with some tribal members in Quebec. And then they were gonna have a training session, and anyways, it's a tribe, like I said. I don't know exactly the name, but Devin said it, and if I'm saying it wrong, then I'm not totally sure, because I did my research, but I couldn't reach a total conclusion from my investigation, or I just probably couldn't find them or something like that. I couldn't pinpoint this particular tribe that he was trying to mention, but he was saying that their genetics was super crazy, that they were some of the tallest people in the world, that they had the genetics for that. And not only that, but like these people also tend to have really big hands and really big feet, so that all adds to my channel, to the indigenous people, and then also to this video that pertains to some of the tallest people in the world. So let's just go first to mention some of the tallest people in the world, and then I'll talk about all of the other stuff like my own height, and I'm a Boricua, because I have some indigenous ancestry. But some of the tallest people in the world that I can mention right here, like I said, if I don't make a full list, then I'm sorry, but I'm just gonna, like, this is like a live video, so I'm just gonna mention some of the ethnicities that are possibly some of the tallest in the world. But I'm gonna start with the Nile. I'm sorry. I'm gonna start with the Nilotes. See, I gave it away. So, anyways, I'm gonna start with the Nilotes, with the Nilotic people. These are East African peoples. They used to be known as Kushites in the far past, in the distant past. They used to be known as the Kingdom of Kush. This was also known as Nubia. This was a kingdom that used to maybe I could say compete, but it used to neighbor. It used to be based in the Nile, for sure, and maybe more to the south from North Africa. But that's because I'm basing my direction, my location, from Egypt. So that's who they had a neighboring kingdom. It was Mizrahin, and it also used to be called Kemet. So those are your ancient peoples, but these probably mixed in the past, and then they also probably mixed with Canaanites, people of Canaan, and then these also from Egypt itself. They went to parts of the Aegean, and then they went to the Levant. Well, and they became people that were known as like Philistines. I mean, I'm not saying that they were the Philistines, but every time I say that, it's because I'm saying that they went there, and every time this happens, you can imply that they mixed with the people that were already there. Maybe not fully, but perhaps at some level, right? For sure. So that being said, let's go back to the Nilotes, the Nilotic people. So I'm not gonna say like they are from one country or nation per se, but I'm just gonna say that this is the lineage and or more broader ethnicity. But people such as the Dinka and the Mandinka in Puerto Rico, they are known as the Mandinga and the Dinga, but that's because they were known to come to Puerto Rico in the past to become slaves, right? So everybody has some Dinga and everybody has some Mandinka. That's those Puerto Rican sayings and the slang, how it changes, because I think it's Dinka. But these people are said to be super tall, and they are said to be super tall, and they have a super long frame. But depending on, I think that if they're more associated to the Bantu, like the Bantu expansion, then I think these are known to have a wider frame, but not as tall as the Nilotic people. But nonetheless, they are still tall, because let's give an example of height. So I'm gonna use, for this video, is going to be in the metric system of feet. So I already mentioned that Devin Lorad is 6'6" from his official DEXA scan results. And the same thing can be said for Brian Shaw, although Brian Shaw has a bigger frame than Devin. Well, they both have a monstrous frame, but it just happens to be the case that Brian Shaw is just freakier in that sense, for all intensive purposes, and for this one, genetic. So that being said, I was gonna mention an example for heights. So if you can go to one of these nations and then you enter the Dinka people, right? Tribe, or where they are at, their locations. So you are most likely going to see a whole bunch of people that are 6 feet and are, so you are basically going to see a whole bunch of people that are 6 feet and above. You walk into this tribe and you may see people that are, 5'7" for sure, 5'9" for sure. But but in general, more people are going to be around and above the 6 feet range. Like, most likely you're gonna have a whole bunch of families with a whole bunch of uncles and brothers that are like 6 feet too, but then you're gonna have some lineages of women that are gonna be 6'3", and this is something that you are most likely, or that you can possibly confirm for yourself if you were to go to some of these tribes, right? So, well, that's the Mandinka and the Dinka, because I think there may be a small discrepancy between the ethnicities of, for instance, the Bantu, because I think they had mixed with some other types of peoples, and I know this to be true, but I just cannot mention who exactly are these people that they mix with. However, Nilotic people, if we jump from the Bantu expansion people, who are your 6-footers, but I'm not saying that they cannot reach 6'6" or 6'9", right? But if we jump into the Nilotic genetics, like, these may not have such a wider frame, but what they don't have in frame, they make up in height, in length, in lengthy proportions in East Africa. So if I said that it would be normal, if I say that it would be normal to see somebody who's 5'9" in Puerto Rico, then I'm somebody that is from Puerto Rico, so I can say, yeah, that's a general height, your average. That's your average. It's like from 5'9" to 5'10" for sure. Like, there's a lot of people that are taller than me, and I'm 5'9". So see, now you know my height. But there's a lot of people here that is 6 feet tall. So an average for Puerto Rico is most likely between your 5'9", 5'10", 5'11" would be too tall as an average for Puerto Rico, because as an average, then that's tall if you would count that as an average number, but you may see a lot of people that is 5'11", but it's not it wouldn't count as an average number nonetheless. So that being said, for the Nilotic people, if we would go to some other tribes, you can see that it would be something common to walk into the tribe and to all of a sudden see a whole bunch of 7-footers. So there is tribes like this. So Manute Bol is from one of these tribes, right? But I think that I read his biography, and this man, I forgot his height, but I think he was like 7 something, right? An extremely tall person. So what was it, like 7'7" or 7'11" or something like that? I'm not sure, but you can write it down in the comments, because I didn't necessarily make an investigation for this video in particular. But especially pertaining Manute Bol, but I think it was around 711, or 710, 79. It could have been something like that, but yeah, 76, 77. I'm not sure. But Manute Bol had like maybe a father who was like 6'2", who was probably short, most likely in his tribe, one of the shorter people. But but his mother, I mean, I think he was like 6'2", or was he like 6'6"? Yeah, yeah, it was more. Oh, no, 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 sorry, he was 6'8". So, and he was still short. I think I read in the story or something like that. He was probably like short because his mother was 6'10". But and then he ended up growing as big, as tall as he grew, that he's now like 7'7" or 7'11" or something like that, around that range. But nevertheless, it's still an incredible height, right? So he was saying that he was saying that he had a great grandfather that was actually 7'10" or 7'11", from 7'10" to 7'11", and then he was the one that was like 7'8" or 7'7" or 7 something like that, but that his great grandfather was from this lineage of kings. But I digress, but not too much, because remember that the lineage of kings in the world is the Canaanites. That's where you get the word king. That's where you get the word Can in English. These are ethnicities that traveled along the world, and they were the tallest among all the locals and all the natives. They went and they became the raiders and the barbarians, and the later barbarians and the later raiders were their intermixed children. So I wanted to say the Canaanites or the Canaanites, because if you look at the word Canada, so you can already see that you have the prefix Khan, king, and some of the tallest people in the world come from the lineage of the Canaanites. So it's probably their ancestry, that's making them so tall, and this is also probably linked with the RH negative. This is totally true, but anyways, I still digress, because now I'm going to list that. This was super interesting. That's why it took so long for me to reach this point. But 7-footers. The Nilotes are 7-footers. It's like a number that I would just stamp on them. The Bantu expansion, they can be shorter, but they can reach to great heights. But an average for them, I can easily say like a 6 feet or something like that. Should be okay. But then I'm gonna mention other tall people. So I've read a whole bunch about history since I was the child in my life, and I remember that the people of Montenegro. In the past, the people of Montenegro used to be some of the tallest people in the world. By the time that I used to, read information, and I was a child. But I can see a clear connection that it's because the Balkans, that Balkan region is also connected to the Aegean region, and some of the people from the Aegean region were also from Mizrahim, were also from Nilotes, from Nubia, and were also from Canaan. So that's where you're getting some of the tallest people in the world. If you're not tall and in the Balkans, then it would be pretty weird. but not necessarily, like you like it's not coming out of the rule set, but because there's different peoples and different lineages, but for instance, Illyrians, these people may be mixed, right? And they may have some lineages. Some of these ancient Canaanites, they had to take women from the normal humans, if I could say it in that way. They had to take women from normal humans because they would suffer from conditions where they couldn't procreate, maybe, and sometimes they would mostly have boys. If you read history, then you would know that to be true. That's why I laugh, because there's so many connections that it may look like I digress, but I totally not. It's just all connected. Illyria to the Aegean, Pelasgians, that at one point they used to be one people, but they would also overlap with the Philistines. So I mentioned your Aegean people and then your Balkan people. So you can lump up different Balkan nations if you want in the comments, but I'm gonna mention the actual tallest country or nation in the world, but it's because of per capita. And this could also be due to not being just an ethnicity, this is a whole nation. And on top of that, it is said that they enjoy a well-being and quality of life, and it's most likely due to a diet that is high in maybe protein. So these are the people from the Netherlands. I think I accidentally said, no, yeah, I said the Dutch, right? So these people that I'm gonna mention here are the Dutch. So I have already said the Dutch, the Nilotes. This may, when I say Nilotes, this can have a broad range, like maybe people from Somali or Somalia or Somalia, or from Ethiopia, and Eritrea, and other nations like that. I've mentioned the Bantu expansion, that these people are tall. These people are where they're getting a whole bunch of genetics to do a whole bunch of to do a whole bunch of hard labor in the Caribbean in the 15th century. So write in the comment section some of the reasons or I don't know, some historical or genetical facts that you may want to include about the Dutch or the Netherlands, or other facts that you would like to add onto this video. Well, that would be pretty cool. And then what tall people, what other tall people can I think about off the bat? So I have no idea, because look, I can mention people from Polynesia, that they have some tall people over there, and they are big framed, but they're not entirely the tallest people in the world, because they also share some ancestry from the Negritos, and some of the Negritos could be some of the shortest in the world too. Like some of the people from Melanesia could be like literally an average of like 5'2", and that's not even exaggerating. That's just some facts that I have read, and you can add some facts onto that in the comments. And needless to say that some of the tallest people in the world may be also in the Solomon Islands. That is hilarious of how much of historical background and things from that we can extrapolate, and it's so funny. And I'm not even digressing, but if you know, then you know, because that's super funny. But if you know, then you know. But I don't need to say much more onto that. If another nation or ethnicity that can be taught, I forgot the ethnicity in particular, but I think it's like, okay, this one is in China, but I think it's called Shandong. So people from Shandong or Shandong, the people from Shandong. So those people are some of the tallest people in the world today. This is most likely the ethnicity where Yao Ming is coming from. And that dude is huge. He's like I knew that he was like 7'5". So he's getting his genetics from an arrangement of marriage between his tall parents that were most likely from China, but in Shandong. So I will make videos onto why some of these people are so tall, but this video is getting so long, but it's pretty interesting because I can actually, intermix and combine so many disciplines. For instance, genetics and the historical genomics and last names, etymology, geography, and more, and I can really get to some interesting conclusions. And also with linguistics, it's crazy. Like, I know that some people don't, some people don't depend on the linguistics because of so many reasons, and I know them, right? So by that, I'm saying that I don't depend on the linguistics either. But there's also no coincidences. I mean, there is, because I've studied this a lot, and I can go like, oh, this name is similar in this nation and in that nation, but I conclude that I don't think they're not related at all, these two names or words that are so similar. But then again, there's so many words that I have also studied, and then I discovered that they share similar meanings and they share similar ancestry when it comes to the groups that mention these words and these names with similar meanings and words that sound similar. And then you reach super incredible advanced conclusions when you mix archaeology with genealogy and genetics and and then if you mix that with the historical, I'm not saying, oh, mix it. No, I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying mix it. I'm saying compare it. Like, for instance, if in Puerto Rico we see a genetic lineage called C, and then we know that some people are in Asia doing some historical things, right? And then in their historical records, we know that they went to Puerto Rico. And if we find their same genetic lineage where they used to be, and then we find it in Puerto Rico, and they didn't say where exactly, nobody told us, but and then there's the mythological situation and crisis where you're not gonna confirm something because it may be mythological, so you cannot confirm it. So that's the issue, right? But in reality, you have to make the connections and you have to connect the dots scientifically, and if you are waiting something to be yellow, and you're waiting, and you make the scientific test, and you run through the method, and in the end you see, something that you were waiting for. You see the yellow that you were waiting for, or the red that you were waiting for, or the green that you were waiting for. Then that's how you prove, or that's how you prove things. That's how I've done things. That being said, the Canaanites, they were also found in Puerto Rico, but that's by my claim. That's why am I saying this? They found indigenous people in Vieques. I mean, not indigenous people, indigenous remains, archaeological finds of remains of indigenous people in maybe some caverns in Vieques, which is an island of Puerto Rico, of the archipelago of Puerto Rico. And these people were 13 feet tall. That's not normal, that's not natural. But if you understand and compare things with the historical, and then you do an investigation, and you actually reach to those, you reach those levels of understanding where you can actually prove it. So I'm not saying that I found those 13-foot bones, but I'm saying that they found it. The scientists, the archaeologists that found it, and they were like, these indigenous peoples were 13 feet tall, and it's not something that was genetic. They found more all along the Caribbean. They found their families, and the children were tall. They were proportionate, and this also was found in Patagonia. But now, some of what I would say that it could be some of their children today that mixed with some of the smaller indigenous people that came from Siberia. So those people from Ojibugamo, that Devin Lorat was saying, that he said that he was walking up the stairs to meet some people or something like that, and there was some guy up in the stairs. And as he was getting closer, he's 6'6", and as he's getting closer to this guy, he just kept looking up. He just kept looking upward. He just kept looking up. And when he got next to him, he kept looking up, and he's 6'6", and he's looking up. And I saw that, and I was like, wow, I gotta talk about the tallest people in the world. And I think that if I know I may not mention your nation, and there's a lot of European nations that I can also mention, but indigenous people of the Americas are supposedly some of the people that genetically have some of the potential to be some of the biggest, and actually are very strong in their frame and very proportionate, and supposedly have a lot of strength and a lot of fiber, twitch muscles could be possibly involved for strength, and maybe are also even nimble. But Devin, so to cut to the chase at last, but it's just so interesting to me, but just so interesting, right? But to cut to the chase is that Devin Lorat estimates that these indigenous peoples from Ojibugamo, and if I remember their particular nation, then Cree, that these are he says Cree Indians, but I know that they may have a different name, and he said Ojibugamo, but I'm not totally sure, because he said North Quebec, but that's probably where they met. But when I read their particular location, it was something more like to central Quebec or South Quebec. This is the frozen north of Canada, it's still like they, he said that, to cut to the chase, he said that they were like possibly 7-11 or in the mark of 7-11 to 8-1. Because Devin Lorette, he probably knows a lot, but I'm gonna say that he could probably sometimes just stretch things like, but not that much. Like I know that he probably meant it, and it's probably around the 7-11 mark. I'm gonna probably say, but I'm not gonna speak for Devin because I wasn't there. And if they're 8-1, then that would be it's so tall. So I have known that indigenous people have the capability to be some of the tallest people in the world, but you have to understand that they also have some of the lineages that are some of the shortest people in the world. For instance, people from, I don't know if it was Costa Rica women or some women from Central Asia are some of the shortest in the world, where they're like 4 something, and they were gonna compare that with Dutch men who have an average of like 6 something, I don't know. But all these people can have like total basketball career. But going back to the indigenous people, so Canada, the Khans, the Canaanites, caciques, los cacicagos, casaquillas, these tall people are also the kings that they went to all the groups of the world, and they ruled over them. They just could do that because they were bigger. If you're bigger, then you would do the same thing. But these people were so much bigger, bodies bigger, bodies taller. That's not an exaggeration. They had these families in almost all the modern day countries. For instance, Rome, it said that they had a whole bunch of short people, but their rulers, however, their rulers, they had this general or something, this Roman emperor or something, or general, that was like 8'3", and it's not. And it was because of the lineage of the kings, the Kens, the kings, the Khans, the Ken, like Boriken, the Kenites, who also stem from Esau, who was known as Esau the Red. So that's why maybe, that's why I laugh, right? Like, maybe that's partially the reason why most of them have red hair. But then again, I'm gonna confirm that that's not the entire reason, because there is a little bit more factors that I do know I could mention. But anyways, I'm gonna digress, but because he doesn't have to do with this video in particular, but he is the patriarch of the Kenites, who were some of the Canaanites that actually survived. So there was a full tribe of Canaanites, of tall people, of kings that managed to spread. Some of them became priests in the Levant, and they just became kings all over the world. And we're seeing this with the indigenous people too, but they have the capability of having also, for some reason, these lineages, man, that today they are known to be seen in North America, where you had tribes with indigenous people that used to be 7 foot tall. You had a chief named Chief Reach Clouds. Chief reaches the clouds. Chief touches the clouds, or something like that. But totally real. Like if you Google that or you browse that, then you will find that to be true. And these people were 7 feet tall and totally nimble, super strong. Like for instance, they were 7'1". So this means that if they were once the Kenites, or if they were to be once the Canaanites, then that would mean that a Kenite would take a woman from one of those nations, like Costa Rica that are like 4'2", who were even possibly shorter in the past. Who knows? Maybe 3'9" as a general height for these women when the general diet was even less and the general height was even less. So that would mean that if a Kenite who would be, I don't know, maybe 9 feet tall or something like that, maybe 8 feet tall or something like that. So if you take a Kenite and intermixes with one of these women from the indigenous party, who I'm just gonna give a flat number of like 4 feet, then the child that is gonna come from that is gonna be around your 7-footers. It's gonna be your 7-footers, your 7'5" people today. And that's how you explain some of these extreme height. As an enthusiast onto genetics, I confirm it doesn't have to do with adaptations. No, warning. It has, like you can add that in as a factor, and I'm not gonna debate you even that much because you can't do that. Do it. As a matter of fact, do it because whatever, right? But here I confirm you that it has not to do with environmental adaptations. It doesn't. The key factor for height in the world is lineage. The key factor, because in the past, you had two types of humans. And they call them antediluvian humans. But one is super short, and one should be super tall, like maybe 3 bodies on top of the normal humans in height. And that's not stretching. There's evidence for that. There's very very short people and there's very very tall people. So who's right and who's wrong, right? So these people, so that's the primary factor that I'm just gonna tell you. That's a primary genetic factor. You take your genes from your father, and that's how it goes, because the lineage is what dictates the phenotype, how tall, how wide, what color, what hair, what legs, how hairy, and how lengthy, how pale, how dark, how cheekbony, or how not. For those people who wouldn't have those type of features in their faces or whatever. Well, it's all passed down through either the chromosome or either the mitochondria. So if I want to just say the names of these two, there is just two. You can say that there is a name for these binary genetic lineages of humanity. One is the seed of man, which is what they call Adam, and the other one is the seed of Cain, which is also known the seed of the serpent. And through there you may also find mongoloid features in the world. Oh my, you can explain so much through these two lineages. One is most likely longer nosed and with wider eyes, but the seed of Cain and the seed of the Canaanites are usually taller. Usually, not necessarily a rule, but they also are maybe the carriers of East Asian features, for sure. Thank you for watching this video. Some of the tallest people in the world.